Hello, all you podcasters out there. This is Timothy Case.
And Heather Jane.
And you have just stumbled upon Pet Parlor.
Well, hopefully they didn't stumble. Hopefully they actually wanted to listen.
Point taken. If this is your first time listening to Pet Parlor, it's a show about pet care and the bare necessities of taking care of your pets or wanting to be with a pet. Matter of fact, we do have a couple of pets in with us today.
Yeah. Everybody say hi to Jon Snow. That wasn't Jon Snow, that was Tim.
Yes, Tim being Jon Snow.
No, Jon Snow is my son. And Godiva is my daughter. And then we have Molly here today.
Exactly. So Heather Jane has been my friend for quite a while. And she's
really obnoxiously long time.
I love irritating her once in a while. It's fun.
Once in a while. Yeah.
Anyway, she is a wonderful pet parent to two little Jack Russell Terriers.
Yeah, little bundles of energy.
Now, you might know from my previous episodes, or maybe not, that I am kind of opinionated on certain things. So if you think that I'm wrong on anything, please give me an email at timcase17@gmail.com.
How do you spell that?
TIMCASE 17@gmail.com.
Nice, very nice.
Today's episode is actually foods that are bad for dogs. And not just foods that are bad, but the reasons why they're bad for dogs. Because we don't want to just label them out and then you wind up thinking, oh, is this bad? Is that bad? So, without further ado, let's go on to this list.
And number one on the top of our list, and these aren't really in any particular order of like severeness or not. These are just in. Actually, I think are they alphabetical? No, they're not alphabetical. Okay, so the first one on our list is avocados. And I know avocados, they are yummy, 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 and I love putting them on sandwiches with some bacon and cheese, and oh gosh, that sounds so good.
Or just eating avocados whole.
I'm hungry now. I'm really hungry now. Okay, but you should not give them to your dogs, and this is why. The pit, and that's really, really annoying part to get out that usually people end up slicing their hand trying to knife out. Your dog can choke on that. So you definitely don't want to give that to them. And then also,
there's a substance in it called persin. Now, persin can actually induce vomiting and diarrhea within dogs. So that's definitely not something that you want to give your dogs, is avocados because of this reason.
Yeah, and they could be pretty bad. I mean, if your dog gets starting to vomit and diarrhea, that is going to make them dehydrated, and that's just a whole nother problem with all that. And let's go on to number two. So, Tim, what's our number two?
Number two is coffee. Now, the reason why coffee is on there is because the amount of caffeine that is in coffee. And so,
I don't know. I like that amount of caffeine. I'm pretty good with that amount of caffeine. I don't think the dogs... honestly, my two dogs, my Jack Russells, who are already full of energy, I really don't think that they need it. I think the last thing that any dog needs is caffeine, especially my dogs. Because they, honestly, without the caffeine, without anything, they are running circles around me to begin with. So I think, honestly, if my dogs got a hold of caffeine, I think we would all die.
So the more important thing on that, too, is like things are like energy drinks, highly caffeinated pop, things like that.
Well, I wouldn't give your dog pop or energy drinks to begin with.
Exactly. It's something that you need to keep an eye of because you wind up leaving it in things that or places that could be easy access to the dog. Mm-hmm. And the reasons are obviously that depending on the size of your dog, too much caffeine can cause like heart issues, have them have a heart attack, stuff like that.
And it can actually cause their death.
Exactly. Next one is apple cores.
Yeah, apple cores. Apples, in general, can actually be pretty good for your dogs. But we're talking specifically here about the core of the apple, the actual seeds, the core. And the reason behind this one is the apple seeds have cyanide in them. And even if you take a handful of apple seeds and eat them as a human, they can actually be deadly. But I mean, it has to be like a handful.
Because cyanide's very like poisonous to carbon people, carbon life forms, period.
Yeah. And so cyanide, anything that has cyanide in it, I believe green beans have trace amounts of cyanide in them, so anything like that has that, you're definitely not going to want to give your dog. And repeating eating of apple seeds can result in medical issues in the dog's life, and not just at this point in their life, but later on in their life as well.
Really? Green beans have trace amounts of cyanide?
Yep, they do. If you eat enough green beans, you can actually die. So
I didn't even know about that.
Tell your parents that. Tell your parents, hey, you remember when you forced me to eat green beans? You were actually contributing to my death. Thanks, Mom.
I'd have to look that up.
I already have.
I already
have looked it up.
So,
Trust me.
And the other thing too.
Trust me.
Another thing too with apple seeds and the amount of cyanide, even though it's really poisonous to us as well, our bodies can process it through and have it out in our system. With dogs, however, it cannot process, so it's going to be through them through the rest of their life.
Yeah, they don't have the luxury of being able to have the digestive system that we have.
The next one is raw potatoes and tomatoes. Not raw tomatoes, but tomatoes.
And one thing that I think of first when I think of raw potatoes is I think of the potato skins, because that's the part that doesn't even get cooked. That gets taken off before you even start dinner, cooking dinner.
Or like say you're dicing up potatoes or making hash browns. Sometimes you wind up accidentally like throwing a chunk of that potato
on the ground. And then you end up calling the furry vacuum cleaners, and you're like, hey, Godiva, or the garbage disposals.
Amish garbage disposals.
The Amish garbage disposals.
That's a hard tongue twister.
Amish garbage disposals.
And they have a substance in them. Wow.
Oh.
Let me find what it's called. The substance is called solanine.
Solanine.
So, solanine is almost like nightshade to dogs. So, even a really small amount can be really, really bad. But if you cook the potato is actually not too bad for your dog.
And then tomatoes. Going on to tomatoes. Tomatoes they're very high in acidity. And so that can very much irritate the inner lining of your dog's stomach, and you definitely don't want that, because then they're going to start vomiting, they're going to start diarrheaing, and that's going to bring on that whole issue with the dehydration and all that stuff that comes with that. So you just stay away from it, And of course, tomatoes and raw potatoes are good for humans. Raw potatoes can actually have somewhat of the same effect. You don't want to eat a raw potato for humans, and so.
I can eat a raw potato.
Well, that's because you're a superhuman stomach man.
It's because I was born in Idaho.
You're also Potato Boy. We called him Potato Boy because he's from Idaho. Potato Boy to the rescue. He can eat raw potatoes in a single swift.
I thought it was Tater Man.
No, you're Potato Boy. You're not Tater Man. You're Potato Boy.
But anyway, the next one is grapes and raisins. Now, the thing is that they're very, very fatal to dogs. And there's not really any chemical or known reason why, but they are. They're just very fatal to them. The thing is grapes are like a big thing for kids to give as snacks,
you definitely want
and treats and stuff like that.
They love them because they're sweet, and so it's like, oh my gosh, my kid is actually eating fruit. Holy crap, I better give them more. That
being said, dogs can taste sweetness as well, and so they love the taste of grapes, unfortunately. But like I said, there's no actual toxic or known toxic. It's just very fatal to them.
And if you happen to know exactly why, would you please email Tim?
Yeah, if it's like if you're a scientist out there,
if we're wrong, please email us and correct us, because we don't like being wrong and just talking about it matter of factly. We're not a-holes like that.
No.
At least I don't think I am.
I know I am.
Yeah, I know you are too. I know you are. So Tim might not care if he's wrong, but I do. So please let us know.
All right, so the next one is pitted fruits. And pitted fruits go on to like the same concept as the first thing that we mentioned with avocados. There are a bunch of pitted fruits that are toxic to dogs.
And it's not just that, too. It's the actual pit. It can get lodged in their throat. It can get lodged in their intestines. It's a blockage. It can keep them, if it gets lodged in their throat, obviously there's issues with that. They can't breathe. If it gets lodged in their intestines, guess what? There's nothing getting past that. So make sure that that doesn't happen by not giving them things that could potentially get stuck in there. And dogs, they love chewing on things. So of course they're gonna want to chew on that pit. They're gonna want to chew on that avocado pit, that peach pit, and eventually they're gonna eat it, because that's what dogs do. You know, you might think that, oh, you know, my dog wouldn't do that, but you know what? They would. The dogs love chewing things, especially tasty things. And so just don't give them the opportunity to put themselves in a life-threatening situation, please. And make sure that if you do give them, you know, treats oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to say that word with the dogs around, the TREATs, with, you know, dried fruit and stuff like that, or, like, even just regular fruit, make sure that it's healthy. Make sure that it's safe. And every single thing, if you're a new dog owner, when I was a new dog owner, the very first thing that I would do before I actually gave my dogs anything is I would look up exactly what you're supposed to do if your dog eats this, or if it's safe for them to eat. And one thing, you know, I actually learned how to do the puppy Heimlich maneuver, because it's actually different for big dogs than it is small dogs. Mm-hmm. And I have small dogs, so any single time that I see that my dog is having issues, because my dog actually has, one of my dogs has asthma, so anytime that I see that he has issues with breathing or anything like that, first what you want to do is you're going to want to check his open up his mouth and make sure that there's nothing lodged there that you can see. And if he's still choking, you're going to want to take your two hands, put them underneath his ribs, and just kind of gently bounce him there with his feet up in the air. And then another thing, if that doesn't work, you're going to want to take him by the feet and kind of pull him upside down. Mm-hmm. And then kind of pat him on the back. And that's how you do the little dog maneuver, the Heimlich maneuver for little dogs.
For big dogs, it's kind of similar. Mm-hmm. You do want to first start with having their head face down in kind of like a wheelbarrow position.
Well, first you're going to want to check to see if you can actually see what's
lodged
in the throat.
First you want to check to see if there's anything lodged in that.
If you can grab it, go for it, you know.
If you can't, then do that.
But do be careful, because if it's something like a peach pit, it could potentially, if it gets lodged in their throat, it could scratch up their throat a little bit. So exactly. You always want to be careful.
Anyway, put them in that wheelbarrow position and kind of lightly shake.
Yeah, kind of almost like you're little, like, bouncing them.
Mm-hmm. If that doesn't happen, you want to compress the abdomen of the dog with your fist, almost like you're actually doing the Heimlich maneuver on an individual. Just make sure that you're at the abdomen part of the dog.
And so that's the big difference, is when it's a big dog, it's more of a fist. When it's a little dog, you're going to want to almost interlink your fingers and put your hands underneath their ribs, almost digging underneath their ribs, and doing that bouncy motion with their feet off of the ground. And you're not putting them in a wheelbarrow position. You're mostly just lifting their feet off the ground with your hands, so that there's that pressure there that's bouncing up and down, that's trying to force whatever it is that they're choking on out of their mouth, out of their throat.
Mm-hmm. The next thing on our list is chocolate. Now, this is like the number one thing.
Chocolate! Did you say chocolate?
So it's the number one thing that, like, everybody has heard of when you ever get a dog is do not feed your dog chocolate.
Don't feed them chocolate. You know, it's always like the thing, like in the cartoons and stuff, and you always hear people saying, like, oh, you know, this person fed my dog chocolate, and you know, it all kind of depends on the quantity, for instance. Like,
exactly.
Let's talk about why exactly chocolate is bad.
So chocolate has a substance called theobromine, which us humans, we can process it.
I like that word. Say that word for me.
Theobromine.
Oh, yes. Say it slowly, Sully.
Theobromine.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, us humans, we can process theobromine really easily through our system. But dogs, they can't. They cannot process it at all. So in very small quantities, like just maybe a little bit of chocolate, you're probably not going to have any effect on your... It's probably not going to have any effect on your dog.
But it all depends. It all depends on your dog's weight. Like, for instance,
exactly.
We used to have a very large retriever. He was a monster of a dog. He was so big, but he was such a softie. He was the goodest boy there ever was. And so one time, me and my mom got really, really into